Adkins is an award-winning chief meteorologist with Woke TV in Huntington, Charleston, West Virginia. As a broadcast and event meteorologist certified by both the American Meteorological Society and the National Weather Association, Spencer has been communicating weather for 30 years in the tri-state area. He has forecasted and led coverage of many major storms, from tornado outbreaks to Superstorm Sandy to major floods to derechos. I'll pass it over to Spencer. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Well, my role today is as a forecaster for Drum Corps International, for Bands of America, and for Winter Guard International, marching arts. It's kind of a passion of mine, and I got into that a couple of years ago. And if you'll notice, even just one little edit that I made on the first page, case studies, DCI, but mitigating individual excessive heat injuries. I've noticed that we've been using EHI as excessive heat illness. And I would say that, and I would argue that, we are also trying to mitigate excessive heat injuries. And just as a communicator, when I deal with people, if I say, hey, we want to watch out for heat illness, and you get the nods. But if you say, we want to watch out for heat injury, you get people's attention. And so maybe that's a modification right out of the box that I would suggest. As a practitioner, and I'm not a PhD, so many great, brilliant minds here today. To be included is a true honor. But we'll go through this quick case study here because we do deal with heat. I got brought into the DCI in particular. Next slide, please. In about 2019, and we started, myself, Dr. Kevin Clazel, who many of you know, and Tyler Hollingsworth, and we started kind of more like a lightning policy group, watching out for storms and so forth. But quickly that morphed into a heat mitigation situation. And so Drum Corps International has been very good about trying to lead the way. On a given night, this picture was taken in Atlanta. I was the forecaster responsible for that. We do most of it remotely, but I was on site. We had a risk of storms, but also the heat that day was incredible. And so we have, in this case, maybe 3,000 performers, probably 20 corps, 150 each. So that's a lot of people that are performing. And then, of course, I think we had something like 12, 13,000 people in the stands. Luckily, as you could see, the sun was behind them. But this is a tour that goes across the country, 80 to 90 events a year. And it seems like, well, all the spots are hot, but in particular, California, Texas, Oklahoma, the heat and humidity of the Southeast and so forth. So there's a lot of places that we have to deal with the heat every day, every night. Next slide, please. And so the daily heat challenge is obvious. You're on turf in most instances. You're talking about sometimes the daily just air temperature is 105. Surface temperatures in Oklahoma have been read above 170 to 180. So that's a part of the discussion too. We're not just trying to work with wet bulb globe temperature, but we did a lot of work this past year with the actual surface temperature, and we put in a threshold of 160 degrees as the no-go, and then we wait until it comes back down to 150. We don't need people getting burned on those surfaces. Also, we need to think about things like props, if they're made out of metal and getting hit by the sun, like what's the temperature of that? And we suggest PPE for, gloves, sleeves, things like that, so we don't get burns. There's a lot of different things that we're looking at. The wet bulb globe temperature readings, that was modified to 92. This was 2 years ago. We were using 90. We went to 92 per UIL. We kind of work hand in hand with so many of these different units, and that seems to be within the marching community, the threshold that we can get buy-in with. Rehearsals on the field can run for 2 to 3 hours at a time in the maximum heat. And one thing that has occurred, some of the units have been deciding to shift that maybe to an earlier part of the day, or maybe change that to the evening if they're on a remote site where they don't have any noise regulations, things like that. And exposure, as I mentioned, to turf and props, which are often made of metal, that can be a problem. And so we're always cognizant of that. So next slide, please. And, every day is just a challenge as we're out there with the tour. This is the heat action plan, a sample from, I believe this was 2 years ago. And you can see it's robust. I mean, we went from, oh yeah, we got some problems with heat. What do you guys suggest, to this? Of course, Dr. Clazel helped really develop this. And there are great ideas from other entities, like I said, like UIL and so forth, but it's robust. And number one thing is you got to have a plan. And so many people have said a plan, a policy. This is our policy. And so we go to all the events with this is our policy. We talk about it, we study it, we share it, we learn it. Next slide, please. And again, you can't have enough policy with that. And that helps you get buy-in in your community or your event, whatever it is. So we talked about in that last exercise, how many days ahead? We're usually looking about 7 days out. Of course, those of you who deal with convection allowing models know that that's not really possible. When we're dealing with heat, it is a little more possible. On-site readings are taken before and during the event. We've gone to Zealous WBGT app, and we do have Kestrels too. And sometimes you can kind of balance them both, but our primary with Drum Corps International is a Zealous WBGT app. Let's see, field turf temperature readings are taken, of course, handheld infrared. And we kind of know, we've built a book basically and intelligence over the past couple of years. We know the sites. We're at the same sites again and again. We kind of know when the numbers are going to break in our favor. And start times have been pushed back on tour. By and large, you talk about like Texas and Oklahoma, most of our times have been pushed back past sunset, which is going to help you be in the green, or at least in a zone in the yellow maybe when you're dealing with wet bulb globe. And certainly with the turf temperature, you're going to be within limits. Next slide, please. And so our case study here, it revolves around July 8th, 2024. We knew this was going to be a deal. We knew that we had a record heat wave. And so Drum Corps International, days before, this is 3 days before, issued this and lots of social media, excessive heat warnings and advisories across West Coast to modify upcoming event details for select events. And it went into, hey, we're going to push all of this stuff back. Everything is going to be pushed back so that we're going to be safe. So the Bakersfield show, no risk of rain. Next slide, please. That part was pretty easy to call. And this is our setting. And I should have put it the way it is. The stadium is actually northeast, southwest. So hopefully you're going to have a little bit of shade, but not as much as I would have liked. A lot of our north-south fields are fine because the sun will set behind the away stands if they're tall. But this is what happened that day. On July 8th, we actually had 114 degrees. Now, there was not any pushback from the Drum Corps people, and this was days ahead. But a couple days ahead, there was some discussions from they, and some of you who do events know that there's always a they, and who knows who that is. You're not talking to them directly. I'm dealing with DCI. They're dealing with whoever they is, and there was a mention of, well, they'd like to try and stay around 6 or 7. That wasn't going to be possible. So, we really had to communicate the risk, communicate the numbers. And next slide, please. Those numbers stayed up all the way through. So the messaging to DCI started days ahead. The heat risk elements were there. You didn't even really have to use that product as much as just, hey, here's your wet bulb globe. This is what the forecast is going to be for that. We're going to be above 92 throughout much of the day. Rehearsals, are really a no-go. They are responsible for their own rehearsals when not on the property that DCI is renting or hosting at. But most of them are like, hey, we understand how this goes. So hopefully they modified their practice that day. Turf was going to be well above 160. In 2024, we were using Kestrels as the default monitoring device. All parties were reminded to utilize them. Every unit has one or should have one. We do run into problems with inconsistency of reading, which is another reason we went to Zealous. Readings were taken on site vigorously that day, and after discussions, yes, indeed, the show was pushed back all the way to 8:30. All the plan was going great. Next slide, please. This is when you're looking at things and you're going, this is fantastic. We got the show moved back. There's the actual lineup. Welcome National Anthem at 8:30. The sun is going to be down behind at least a portion of the stands, so the fan comfort is going to be maximized, even though the actual temperature was 105, but you know what they say in California, but it's a dry heat. The dew point was 46. The wet bulb globe actually did break because of mixing and the timing of the day. And, it was fantastic. All the numbers were go, let's go. Turf temperature well below 160. We took the intermission out, so we squeezed the program. Everything was going to be perfect. And then the next slide, please. Well, we went from that great plan to this. Next slide, please. One thing we didn't really plan for was the fact that there were, next slide, please, fires around. And, usually we'll talk about smoke, but there was dry conditions. There were some fires, there was some wind, and somehow, somewhere, a power line went down. So we did everything right up to that point, but the power went out. And unfortunately, that show ended up getting canceled for different reasons. Didn't have any power, couldn't run the lights. And it's kind of a, hey, everybody runs or nobody runs. So that ended up being kind of a weird instance. But as a case study, I just wanted to show that everything was planned correctly. communication was brought forth. We didn't have to really push too hard because the messaging was great from the Weather Service. The wet bulb globe forecast was going to be way out of the range. Even if we broke at 6 o'clock, sometimes you can get that. You'll break down below the numbers at 6. But we said, no, you can't have people in the stands still at 114, 112 at 6 o'clock. We'll utilize the shade. All these things came together. Next slide, please. And then we had something that was a little outside of our control. But the key to all this was there was a policy in place. It was communicated well. People understand it. We're continuing to build the culture around the policy. Again, policy, policy, policy. And if you utilize it and it's based on science and you're consistent with it, you can build a culture. You need to be consistent with that messaging across the board. And remind your constituents this, that it's built around science. We're not trying to bubble wrap the world. We're not trying to take away your fun. But the point is not to gatekeep, it's to keep safe. That's the key. And our last slide, I think I have one or two more. Just real quick, for DCI, the show start times do get pushed back off, and that's part of the culture now. You can see that happening. Rehearsal times have been amended, and they've added some strategic, like, hey, let's take what we call nap block. Let's go into the AC for a couple of hours. The athletic trainers have their own regimen that they're following with the performers as far as taking care of them. I do work with Bands of America. It's great to see places like McAllen, Texas, which is insanely hot and humid in September. And they have, the city actually came in and brought us some cooling tents and some cooling structures so that we could take care of the performers that way. Schedules have been shortened and modified for Bands of America. And we even had for Winter Guard International, you wouldn't think that we'd have problems with marching arts, but in the winter we did. And we had in California a show that had 105 degrees. Everything that goes inside for performance is outside. So we had to create some messaging for that. And everybody bought in, including what I call the dad rule of no bare feet on those surfaces when you're out there, because we have actually seen performers get their heels burned walking across the asphalt. So again, policy helps you create culture, stay safe again. And again, it's not about gatekeeping. It's about keeping safe. Glad to take any questions or comments.
Thank you for the excellent presentation, Spencer. Right now, we don't have any questions yet in the Q&A section, but folks, if you have any questions, feel free to enter them in. From my end, I was curious. Oh, we actually did receive one. Spencer, you mentioned wildfires, but were there any plans for wildfire smoke?
Yeah, so smoke is something that we do look at. What I didn't add into the plan or my thinking was, what if the power line gets burned or pushed down? So smoke, we do monitor air quality. We have some thresholds in there. Don't have them right in front of me, but we do monitor that. We've had some shows where we have either pushed delayed or had some, some basically, hey, if we have somebody with a health issue, they don't have to run, that kind of a thing. So yeah, on the fly, that was the one part of it that, yeah, there was probably even a mention if I pulled up my notes. Yeah, there's some fires around. There could be some air quality. We were monitoring air quality too, but just you can't foresee a power line, but I am going to try and keep that in my notes moving ahead. Hey, we could have a power outage, that kind of a thing.
Absolutely. No, those are definitely important factors and good to keep in mind for future planning. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.